50 MPs and peers called for the creation of a so-called Gaza family scheme that would see Palestinian refugees move to the UK. But according to the latest GB News People's poll, the British public aren't so keen on the idea. People were asked this question: to what extent would you support a scheme to take in refugees from Palestine? Here's how they responded. 29% of people said that they strongly support or tend to support the idea, while 42% of people strongly oppose or tend to oppose it. So the public opinion is clearly very much against this. Now I'm joined in the studio by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, welcome to the show. So on Monday, this letter emerged, 50 MPs and peers, has to be said mainly from the Labour side of the camp, wrote to the Home Secretary demanding that we took Palestinian refugees in. The people have spoken, and once again, it appears to indicate that the politicians are completely out of touch with the public on this.
Absolutely. I think this indicates quite a big fight coming for Labour. The Conservative government have said time and again that they have no plans to admit Palestinian refugees to the UK. But obviously, if Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister later this year, there will be huge pressure on him from his own backbenchers to open up some sort of Palestinian refugee scheme. And as this poll shows, that idea just is not popular with the public. A very large proportion actually don't know, which is quite interesting in itself, because I expect in the next few months we can see those numbers solidify on one side or the other. But just 12% strongly support the idea for such a scheme. Now, if you compare that to the response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine right at the beginning, weeks after the first invasion, the question wasn't quite the same, but YouGov put a question to the British public, which was, do you believe we have a moral obligation to help to admit refugees from Ukraine? And 65% of the population said yes. There is clearly a huge difference here, and presumably that difference is cultural. It's about values. It's about the difference between letting people in who've come from Europe and letting in people with a whole different set of values from the Middle East. And that is probably what's causing that tension. It'll be really interesting to see what, if anything, Keir Starmer says about this. At the moment, he's keeping his powder dry, and I suspect he'll continue to do so until well after a general election.
And it makes you wonder why they're doing this, because they know it won't be enacted. These MPs who are writing the letter, no way on earth, particularly would a Conservative government do this. I don't think there's any way on earth that a Labour Party government would do this. Is it just virtue signalling to their constituents once again to pander to votes, the pro-Palestine mob?
I think possibly there's an element of, well, appealing to their constituents. I think it's also worth remembering that Labour Party members are very important to Labour MPs at the moment. It's not just the wider voters. It's not just for them about winning over swing voters who probably, from this poll anyway, aren't particularly keen on a Palestinian refugee scheme. It's about keeping on side those Labour members. Labour members tend to be much further to the left than the average Labour voter. And those are the people who go out and knock on doors at general elections, who'll do all the leafleting, do all the hard work, put in the steps to get MPs re-elected. So I suspect that these MPs are very keen to keep Labour members on side.
And the don't knows might have their opinions swayed. If we look at a study from 1992, Denmark accepted 321 Palestinian refugees. The data, the ONS data of Denmark, went on to show 63% of those originally admitted went on to have criminal records. 49% of them were fined or otherwise, 26% jailed, plus 65% of all Palestinians who went to Denmark ended up on some type of benefit. If those kind of figures were relayed to the British public, they might not be so unsure.
I think you're probably right about that. It's also quite interesting to look at, YouGov did a poll a couple of months ago looking into the people who said that they did want to accept Palestinian refugees into this country. How many Palestinian refugees did they think Britain should be accepting? And the vast majority were looking at a few thousand. So it's not kind of huge numbers. So it's interesting. I wonder if the politicians are actually much, much further, more extreme about this, more keen on a much bigger scheme than even some of those who are in the 12% of strongly support on our poll.
Superb stuff. Olivia Utley, thanks for joining me in the studio.